So I rewatched just a little bit of this video, and one thing I noticed is stop saying the videos you're watching are a waste of time. If you think what you have to say isn't a waste of time, then watching that generated the energy you needed to make the video you wanted to make. So that 10 minutes is what you have to do your 10 minutes you like or something. But anyway, whatever. That's not what this is about. This concept again, that the DNA. You see, in this video, Gary, you say, you paraphrase gratex as saying we should just sit around in the lawn chair and let the DNA run things, not use our brain, and let the DNA run things. But again, as you know, from my point of view, the DNA built the brain, right? So if we want to let the DNA run things, then we have to use our brain. We would have to assume we were given it to use, right? And use to survive, not to destroy necessarily, unless you needed it to survive, but to survive. To use the brain to survive. Now, the brain has a lot of problems and it might self-destruct, but I don't see that if we survive. For example, I don't think we can survive as a species if we keep wasting all this energy on war. Right? Because either we beat ourselves down to where we're all spread out and there's only a few of us left, start over. Or we have a society with a lot of people and there's just no way we can, war is either we're gonna destroy ourselves or we're just weakening ourselves against the environment. Okay. So, even now, imagine if we were using all the militaries of the world, all of the force of those militaries. For every rocket, we have a speedboat in the Coast Guard, and they're, rescuing people from acts of nature. I mean, it would be overkill. We wouldn't even need that much for that. So I just don't see war as long-term sustainable. So if the brain is going to survive, it's going to have to figure out how to get past war, right? And then it would be letting the DNA run things. The DNA gave us a brain so we could figure out how to survive. But the thing about attributing thank you, DNA, like we should thank you, you have an agenda to help us. Well, no, because, the DNA is also in other creatures that are competing with us. And, the DNA has this sort of behavior where it's like, here, have a brain, see if it helps you survive. Oh, it didn't? Well, that's interesting. Or actually, I'm not even going to remember it. We'll just try something else. Maybe we'll even try brains again. I've got billions of years to do this. So this is what I mean about, there's not a competition. It's like we are not using our brains well. This is the point of making my definition of an enlightenment process. Even though we can't know what's really enlightening as all the detailed facts, we can make these generalizations, I think, that it's taking things into account on larger and larger scales and feeling these connections. Okay. And, this is because that's what we have to use our brain to do. To survive, we're going to have to become more enlightened. And, the DNA has given us the brain that figured this out. And even though we've had thousands of years of slavery, it's given us the brain so that we still have a word for slavery and we're still trying to get rid of it. And a lot of us think we have. And we mostly all want to get past it, or as I said, think we have. And, I feel thankful. Thank you, DNA. I could imagine that I might be a kind of an animal that after a few thousand years of slavery would just think, oh, I'm a slave animal. That's what I do. And we're not that way. And that's good. And that's the brain. And you and I believe that we're both attributing the brain with that capacity. It's adaptable. We love the adaptability of the human brain, but one of the most amazing things is all the things it refuses to adapt to. So, and those things could just be adaptation on a larger time scale, right? Like you refuse to adapt to something over a couple thousand years because, maybe it'll pass on the 10,000 year level. But something that really comes for millions of years, you just adapt. So maybe it's all adaptation at different levels, but still, in this narrow scope, we have some freedom of thought associated with this brain, allowing us to figure these things out. And I think we have that so that to help us survive. And to survive, we're going to have to become more enlightened, more peaceful. And we're going to have to go in the direction I'd like to see us go. And the nature of the brain, and the DNA and the need for survival all contribute to that, to that need to go in that direction. And I think to a certain amount of necessity, in the sense that it's, kill it or cure it. We either go in that direction or we die out. So, conceptually you can kind of say, well, we're on the way there, and if we don't make it in time because we lollygag or there isn't enough time left or whatever, I love the word lollygag, fine, but that's the destination. If we're going to make it a million years, and by all means a life form, if it's going to be successful, should easily be able to make it a million years. And that's hard for us to imagine, this kind of society going on a million years, isn't it? What kind of weird war would we invent in the next couple thousand years? I mean, this is not sustainable. And yet, as a life form, a life form ought to be sustainable that long. I certainly think the DNA, if it were to be said to have expectations, would expect us to make it longer than a couple thousand years, longer than a couple 100,000, to be considered a success. Okay, so it's given us this brain which can help us over this threshold. You don't deny that. You have ideas to help us over this threshold that you've done with your brain. You just think that your brain's outsmarted the DNA. But I don't understand what it really is that you think the DNA, quote unquote, wants. Because we create our own, to me, all of the agendas possible, they're out there in nature. And we create areas and find areas where it's kind of like having a garden. Having a garden is really nice. The jungle is nice, but having a garden can be even nicer if you're really good. Maybe mix a little jungle in there is my particular flavor. But let's just say a gardener can take an area and make it really nice. When you walk in the forest, okay, it's all kind of beautiful, but in terms of having that like touching garden kind of quality, most of it isn't like that. But sometimes you walk up to the top of a hill and there's a little knoll, or you come into a meadow and there's just an idyllic place. It has this kind of feel that you're going for if you're trying to create a garden. And the magic of gardening is wherever your house is, with some restrictions, and then you can try to recreate this sort of environment, okay? But they happen naturally in nature. And that's what I think is good about nature, is these good examples are out there. But there's bad examples too, And so that's the sense in which nature, is beyond good and evil, doesn't have agenda, isn't saying that the good ones are good and the bad ones are bad. It's just saying here they all are. But it does end up creating these good spots, which we can then go and learn the principles of. And we can make our spots good, wherever they may be. And we can expand the goodness in nature in that way. Okay, that's how I think we get ahead of the game. And it's not outwitting the DNA, though. I mean, the tools I'm going to do this with is this amazing Swiss Army knife given to me by my DNA. I mean, it's given, super complicated computer to accomplish this was given to me by the DNA. How could I just, there's no feeling that's appropriate but thankfulness.